Another important thing we need to talk about is scales. We need to talk about scales. Scales are a relative concept, and I'm going to draw in the basic scale that we are going to talk about mostly in this course. It's called the C major scale. We are going to use this scale mostly for our examples. So the C major scale is, like every scale, a sequence of preferred notes. So notes that we think as composers fit nicely together. So I'm going to draw the C major scale now. It's also the fundamental and maybe the most simple one, starting with C as root note or tonic note. And then it consists of all the white keys on the piano. We skip the black keys, we just use the white keys. So this is one octave inside of our C major scale. Those are the preferred notes we want to play together inside of the C major scale. You probably heard this sequence before and it sounds a little familiar. It's a very basic sequence in the Western music like pop and rock and electronic music as well. The root note is C, which is also called the tonic note, and it's often the point where the melody starts or comes to rest, or even both. Melody starts at the C and comes to rest at the C. Also, we have to know that if a piece of music is played in C major, it's still possible to find chords inside of that scale that aren't C major chords. So there's a difference between a C major scale and a C major chord. So it's still possible to find chords within the scale that aren't C major but lie within the scale. So all the notes I put in here are also called within the diatonic system of the C major scale. What does diatonic mean? Diatonic is basically a relative concept. So we said C major scale consists of all the white notes and we start at C3. And if any note we click in here is on a white note on our keyboard, it will lie within the diatonic system of C major scale. If I'm going to play this note, for example, and this one, and maybe even this one, they are on the black keys of our piano and they're called chromatic notes. So they are out of our scale, out of our C major scale. They're not inside of the white keys on the piano. So they're chromatic, outside of the scale, not part of the scale. So those are important basic terms we need to know because we're going to talk about that a lot later. But trust me, it's going to get so much easier once we are getting to the cool examples. Wrapping this up, I'm deleting all those notes that are chromatic, so all the black keys over here. So the white keys left are within the diatonic system of the C major scale, just as we said, and a C major scale is a sequence of preferred notes. And if we play those notes after each other, that's what we get. And we can also do another thing, we can sort them differently on top of each other. And now we see even better that we are only using the white notes. And Ableton, for example, has a cool function. We can fold notes that are not being used. So if I click this button, this piano roll will only show those notes that we already use. And so if you have trouble finding notes inside of your scale, you can always go ahead in the beginning, define your scale with a couple of notes, and then whatever you're going to do later will lie within the key C major and within the scale of C major. So it's very easy now to come up with fitting chords and melodic progression. Like this, for example. And the last point I want to talk about in this video, scales are a relative concept. So this is a C major scale. If I'm moving this to a different root note, you see the character of those intervals remains the same. And what we're getting now is simply the D major scale. Those notes with the root of D form the D major scale. But you can see that scale, for example, doesn't consist only of white notes. We have one black note here and another black note here playing. So that's a little more complex. So for now, we are keeping everything at C major, like this. And keep in mind, a scale is a sequence of preferred notes, and also it's a relative concept. And every note that lies within a scale is within the diatonic scale of C major. Every note lying outside on black keys in this example is chromatic. So therefore, if we were to paint in a chord that uses one tone outside of this C major scale, it would be called a chromatic chord. So a diatonic chord would be something like this. And a chromatic chord would be something like this. In the C major scale, this is a chromatic chord. And something like this is a diatonic chord. So in order to repeat what we were talking about, over here we see the C major scale with all the white notes between an octave off to C notes. And we said in the first video of this course, we said this is a whole step if we have one note in between, and a half step if we don't have a note in between. So we can form the major scale code that applies to all major scales from this little sequence of the C major scale. And that code is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That always applies wherever you are on your piano, on what key ever you start. If you apply this code, you will always end up with a major scale. So whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, and half step. That's the code for a major scale. That's one important thing. And also, we talked about a scale, which is a sequence of preferred notes fitting together nicely. So it's a relative concept. And also we said diatonic. Diatonic means within the scale. Notes and chords that lie within the scale are diatonic, and diatonic tells you all the available chords and notes that will work within the key that you're working with. We will talk about this more later. We also said chromatic notes are the remaining notes that don't lie within the diatonic scale. And we made this example where we picked one note that was from the black keys inside of our C major scale. Also, we talked about the root. The root in C major scale was C, and the root denotes the idea that a chord could be represented and named by one of its notes. And the root note is the note your chord is based on. If you have a C major chord, the root note for that chord is C.
Understanding music theory is the key to successful and professional tracks, every time. The music theory class for melodic house and techno producers is a practical guideline that shows you powerful concepts and formulas in very close detail so you can improve your chord progressions and melodies right away. Get instant access to all online sessions where you analyze and write chords and melodies that simply work. On top, you get a full online course covering music theory basics for beginners and a huge amount of genre-specific MIDIs to get started on the spot. If you ever wanted to up your music writing game, then this is for you. Available now on Production Music Live.